Morning, Sacramento. This is Craig Ashton. The show is all things legal. This is where curious personal injury attorneys distill topical events into the legal essence. Today is no different. If you want to frame a reference, this is if Ann Coulter and Bill Maher had a radio love child, and this is the outcome. I'm joined by my colleague, fellow Ironman finisher, four-time swimmer from Alcatraz to San Francisco with me. Nice thing when you swim with Ed, he looks more like a sea lion than I do, so I feel as though I'm safer, but he's a faster swimmer. But as you say, the Sharks give us professional courtesy. Edward Shady.
That's because I wear a black wetsuit. Good morning, Sacramento.
And Tim Hodson, a champion fast-pitch hardball baseball player. Currently, you've got 5 champions in a row. It's open. It's basically an open
yeah, it's open division.
Open league, right? So, I mean, anybody
over.
can play all the way up to professional baseball players retired, right?
Yeah, they want to come out there and spend their Sundays, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you got some guys that are in AAA. I mean, you got, 90-mile-an-hour fastballs coming out.
Oh, no, not that hard. But there are still some guys that throw pretty well out there, but no, it's nothing to that level.
Well, if you take into account your age and your perception, it probably
maybe,
feels
yeah,
like
maybe at 37 it looks that fast, that's for sure.
Now, with regard to your glove, is it true you bedazzled it?
No, I did not bedazzle my glove.
Okay,
no.
the bat then.
No, not the bat either, no.
Then I always say that people are motivated if they get insufficient amount of debt. So I gave Tim a really nice practice tee and backboard for golfing, which your 2-year-old and your 4-year-old?
3 and 5 now.
3 and 5.
Yes.
Just started picking up some clubs and hitting them yesterday. So you're going to have to join a country club soon enough, and you'll be working on weekends.
Yes, your debt plan is working.
All right, so let's go ahead and break down what we're going to speak about today. So we've got Robert Baylor, who went to Jesuit and is a sophomore at UC Berkeley, playing on the rugby team. The rugby team has a storied history of championships. This year is no different. They won 43-13 over Arkansas State for the national championship on Saturday. And unfortunately, Robert Baylor, 6'5", 233 pounds, was injured in the first couple minutes of the pitch and ended up in the hospital. And there is concern that perhaps he has permanent paralysis, either affecting all 4 of his extremities or perhaps affecting his upper extremities, his arms. But at this point, his lower extremities look like they're being impacted even more significantly. Ed, you were there. Your son went to school. Zach went to Jesuit with Robert, and they're really good friends. Actually, they went to grade school together, right?
Now, we've known the Baylor family and Robert Baylor since first grade. So over the course of 14 years, our sons went to Cub Scouts together. They spent Christmas, holidays, Easter, Thanksgiving, and everything with the Baylor family, and this is very personal. It was 2.5 minutes into the game. They're in the mall trying to get the ball over the line, and he had a hyperflexion of the neck and had to go emergency cervical surgery that night on Saturday night. And he still can't move his lower extremities, but he's got some minor, some movement with the arms, but not full function. And, it's terribly expensive. It's terribly hard on the family. And we've started a GoFundMe account. So if the All Things Legal audience would like to help out, you can go to just Google GoFundMe, one word, Robert Baylor, and help out. The fund's already raised $350,000, and it's climbing.
Yeah.
And all of that's needed and more. So it would be super appreciated.
Yeah, so definitely. So from a legal perspective, assumption of the risk applies. And that's, rugby's dangerous. And Robert, if you see a picture of him, I don't know him personally, but I know him through you. And I know him because he's a bear and I'm a bear. Donated some money to him. Godspeed, my bear brother. So you see a picture of him. He's studly character, got a smile on his face, full neck brace, hands, in a hospital bed, completely hooked up to all the contraptions you can possibly hooked up to in a hospital, and there he is with a smile on his face, like, I'll deal with this. The kid's a stud. From a legal perspective, there'd be no liability, and that's the aspect of our show that we delve into. And he's going to have some insurance as a result of playing for a team at Cal. But when you're paralyzed going forward, this is a lifelong medical commitment you're going to have to make from a financial perspective, and so it's about at least $1 million if you're a quadriplegic, which would mean all 4 extremities, and if you're a paraplegic, $750,000 or more. So that's what the GoFundMe thing is for. So if you want to support somebody who's from Jesuit, from El Dorado Hills, played for the University of California, Berkeley, the national championship rugby team, This is your opportunity to get some karma, do something nice for a really great young man. And, with technology the way it's moving, let's hope going forward that there's going to be cures for this. And there'd be a way to understand how the nervous system can be repaired. And like I said, Godspeed to him.
Appreciate that very much.
All right.
As a family.
So getting that out of the way, we'll go ahead and talk about the wife of ESPN broadcaster Chris Berman. She died in an auto accident. We'll go ahead and talk about Aaron Hernandez and the murder conviction being set aside as a result of his suicide and how that will impact his contractual rights through his estate to the Patriots and how that might impact the civil case for wrongful death. Joe Montana is suing a high-rise in Millennium Tower in downtown San Francisco. It's sunk about 16 inches into landfill, and it's tilting several inches to the northwest. I mean, there's this lady I was reading. She puts a golf ball down, and it rolls all the way across her kitchen.
That's a tough putt.
Yeah, I mean, people play $13 million for a penthouse in this thing. In Montana, and then Hunter Pence has got a place there, too. So he's suing, and they're suing for fraud, which is you knew this was happening. You didn't tell us about it. And, when you're in earthquake country, I mean, they're saying we're due for the big one. And just in perfect conditions, your building is tilting and it's sunk 16 inches. It's
not going to go well.
No, I don't think I'm down with that. The Raiderettes, they basically sued because they weren't getting paid minimum wage based upon all the extra time they put in. Well, guess what? There's a settlement and they're all getting money. So we'll talk about that. And then I think we'll use the last part of the program to talk about, what happened at Penn State. I mean,
Unbelievable.
Penn State they used to be known as the Nittany Lions, perhaps a great football team. Joe Paterno, a steadfast group of young men that put their nose to the grindstone and never gave up. And now we've got Sandusky and pedophilia and rape of boys. And now we've got this Beta Theta Pi where they got a 19-year-old who's underage, and they're hazing him, and he's drinking all this alcohol, and he ends up dying of brain injury and a spleen injury, and they let him basically lie around for 12 hours. We'll talk about all the evidence that is there, the charges that are being brought to bear against these people, how it's going to impact the fraternity system, and also the university. And, it's pretty.
It's terrifying. I mean, we'll get into it later.
Yeah, and with the evidence now, because, back when I was, my dad was eminent commander at Sigma Nu UCLA. My brother was a Sigma Nu at UCLA. I pledged, but I just wasn't into it. I just couldn't have people telling me what to do. And I was a legacy, and I just said, I don't want to be a Sigma Nu. But not to say there's anything wrong with that. But, it was a lot of fun. I got to go to all the parties. But back then, there's no video. And when you drink that much, you don't remember anything anyway. So you're going to have no witnesses that are going to be credible. But now everything's on video. So that's what they're dealing with. And there's no way around it. When you got this surveillance video, you're toast.
Well, these are supposed to be your friends. I mean, we all went to college. I played lacrosse. We all had fun. All three of us had fun in college. But we had friends that would watch out for us in case something like this happened.
Kidding.
And the fact that this guy's quote-unquote friends did nothing for him and tried to cover their own tracks is just – it makes me sick. I almost threw up reading the story because I could never imagine any of my friends, the guys I played lacrosse with, ever doing this to me or me doing that to one of my teammates if they're in this position, no matter how much trouble I would have gotten in for it.
Yeah, because these guys are supposed to be brothers.
Right.
They're brothers and things like that.
Well, this is his first day. This was like they just signed and agreed to pledge, so they were just getting to know these people. And, drinking, they were going crazy. They're encouraging it. They're basically, if you don't drink as much as they say, your manhood is called into question. And then, they let this guy sit around for hours. And so we're going to break down this moment by moment. There's a full chronology from 9 p.m. on February 2nd all the way through February 4th, 1:24 a.m. I mean, it's going to blow you away.
Yep.
So we're about ready to take a break. But Chris Berman, who's ESPN, his wife unfortunately died in an auto accident, and we're going to break that down. The person that passed away, both of them passed away, and we'll talk about who was at fault for that. And then it turns out the other party was not wearing a seatbelt and the legal issues associated with that. I know you guys haven't seen this story, but I get up early and I start reading, so I'm always going to throw something new at you. But you guys are so unbelievably bright. Your brains are so unbelievably big that there is no challenge that you cannot surmount when it comes to your intellectual acumen.
I heard about it yesterday. So.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll go ahead and talk about Chris Berman's wife and the tragic events that happened in Connecticut, and we'll do that after the break. Please stay with us. All right, we're back. This is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Edward Shady and Tim Hodson. If Bill Maher and Ann Coulter had a radio love child, this would be the outcome. I noticed that G's got some new music. I mean, I've basically made it a Friday kind of new tradition here where I've passed out a bottle of Don Julio and a bottle of really good scotch, and I can see that the G's starting to actually move a lot better, and I see he's smiling like he actually is enjoying the experience.
It's turning into Thirsty Thursdays.
Yeah, they're going full Lord of the Flies with bonfires and the whole bit. So
Margarita Monday, Thirsty Thursday.
So before we took the break, we were talking about the tragic event that happened, I think, yesterday. That Chris Berman, who's an ESPN analyst who just retired.
He's probably the biggest sports broadcaster in America.
Yeah, he did
Everyone knows
NFL
him.
Sunday Countdown. He did Monday Night Football for a while.
He started out with the Giants, actually, a long, long time ago. Started out in San Francisco.
So we're personal injury attorneys at Ashton & Price, so this is basically what we do. I think we probably resolve about $1 million in personal injury cases a month. So this is kind of in our wheelhouse from a legal perspective. And so I was reading this, and so she's going down a 2-lane highway, so basically traffic in one direction going opposite. So 2 lanes, one going in each direction. So according to the information that they have, these are the things that we pay attention to. She hit the car in front of her from behind. So based upon that initial evidence, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to argue that she's going to be the at-fault driver.
Usually, yes.
So what happened was she hit the car in front of her. She went off the and then went into a pond, and it looked, she probably drowned, unfortunately.
That's what it sounds like, yes.
Yeah, and she was wearing her seatbelt, so that would be one of the cases where the seatbelt may have actually made it more difficult for her to survive the accident. It's very rare. I mean, when you're wearing a seatbelt, you're really not protecting yourself against a water immersion. I mean, you're protecting yourself against flying out of the car.
Correct.
So the 87-year-old driver of the car that was hit was not wearing a seatbelt, and he was killed as a result of being crushed by his vehicle. So in his case, not wearing the seatbelt probably led to his death. And in Chris Berman's wife's case, Catherine Berman, wearing the seatbelt probably led to her death. So the seatbelt had, in each case, in opposite ways, probably contributed to the outcome, unfortunately.
Correct. And where did this happen? Does it happen in California?
Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, in California, from a statute of limitations issue, we actually just dealt with this in the office. Since the individual that could be found at fault, well, they're both passed away. Statute of limitations is actually cut down to 1 year instead of 2 years for a personal injury on that, because the statute of limitations only accrues 1 year after the date of a party of the action. So that's just something, a little side note on that.
Yeah, so
as well.
if the defendant dies, you get 1 year, but if you're only looking towards the insurance,
you get 3 actually.
Then you get 3.
Right.
So it's weird. In all cases, we don't want to confuse our listeners. Almost in every case, if it's an individual, it's going to be 2 years. In California, for bodily injury, 3 years for property damage. In the unlikely and unusual event that the person that hits you is at fault and they pass away, then the timelines are different. So pay attention to that.
And that's why you call Ashton Price
Yep.
for the best advice, so we can straighten this out for you. And
Yeah,
let
don't
you
think
know.
twice, Ed, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's what happened. That's tragic. That's a wrongful death case. So the individual that passed away, the wife or children would be entitled to the loss of love, comfort, and support. And when you're 87, typically there's not a whole lot of support issues. The cases that become very problematic from a compensation perspective is if somebody's 30 and they've got a wife and kids and they're making $200,000 a year, and all of a sudden you got 35 years of work life expectancy, and that's almost $7.5 million just in lost income, plus the pain and suffering, which is loss of love and comfort and support. So you just have to prove your relationship. I watched Dateline, and some wives don't like their husbands, and vice versa. And every week they got a story where somebody passes away, unfortunately.
Wow.
And so you would say, in that case, the loss of love and comfort would be really minor if you intended to basically kill your wife, right? So you have to show what the relationship was like. We went on vacations, we loved each other, that type of thing, or you lived in separate houses and you sent each other coal for Christmas. And, so those would be the things that you would take into account to render the subjective to a numeric value, which would be love and comfort.
Yeah, I mean, I just did this a couple weeks ago. I just settled up a wrongful death case down on the coast. I was the
that's right. Yeah,
I was
right.
the defense attorney on the matter.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting set of facts. So they served an underage individual. Your client got in the golf cart. There was no absolute evidence about who was driving the golf cart. The underage individual basically died as a result of the golf cart crashing. And then there was a criminal case which you stepped in and defended, plus there was a civil case for damages.
Yeah, I made a limited appearance on the criminal case, and it was handled by another attorney. But they did find beyond a reasonable doubt manslaughter without gross negligence against my client in the civil matter, and then that went on. I purposely kept it going for at least 3 years so that the sting of the initial
Right.
incident to the family wasn't as harsh. So when we went to the settlement, it could be done with cooler heads as opposed to pure emotion. It's still very, very emotional. Don't get me wrong, but we were able to get it done, and to everybody's mutual benefit to get it off the table and get it behind them so they can move forward with their lives.
There's no amount of money that will ever compensate anybody for losing their life, no matter what the fault issues are. So the imperfect remedy money is just that, imperfect. But yes, you just did that, and so that's what we were dealing with, or what we're dealing with in Chris Berman's wife's case. All right, so we all know about Aaron Hernandez, played tight end for the New England Patriots, played at the University of Florida.
Yep.
There's a lot of really good documentaries on 30 for 30 right now, if you want to pay attention to what he was all about. He was really close to his brother. His brother actually was a star quarterback on the football team before Aaron Hernandez, and I think his brother played college football as well, but wasn't as good as Aaron Hernandez making it to the NFL.
Does his brother also play at Florida?
I don't think so.
No, he played at a smaller school, but he was a really good quarterback. And they were super, super close, and then his brother was getting into coaching. And then Aaron Hernandez got arrested for murder. It was difficult for him to find a job, and so now he's actually doing, I think, roofing in Texas.
Right.
So what happened with Aaron Hernandez? His second case, and this is where the timing really makes sense if you wanted to say he did this on purpose for legal reasons, is that he was found guilty of killing Odin Lloyd and got life without possibility of parole. Then he had a second murder case. 2 individuals were killed, and he got acquitted on that one.
Correct.
And then within a few days of being acquitted, so now all of his legal issues, because he didn't have to wait for this other one, all of his legal issues are done. Because if he would have been convicted on that one, then the suicide would have the same effect that it had on his conviction.
Correct.
So he was acquitted. He was convicted of another, and he was in the middle of an appeal and waiting for the appeal to be perfected, because you have that by right in Massachusetts.
Now, that was the question I had. I don't know, Tim or Craig, but on the Odin Lloyd matter, it was an automatic appeal because it was a death sentence he was looking at?
Yes.
But on the other convictions, I don't think he was looking at death sentence. So
He wasn't
it might not-
convicted. He was acquitted.
Yeah, he was acquitted. But had he been convicted, I don't know if it was an automatic appeal that would have gone along with that sentence. He would have had to file.
I mean, I think he wanted to know how that happened,
Yeah.
because he knew from somebody that if he killed himself, that abatement ab initio, which means a new beginning, would basically wipe his whole slate clean.
Right.
And so if he got convicted on the second one, at least he would have that legal argument when he committed suicide. Once he found out he got acquitted, I don't think there's any coincidence that he committed suicide shortly thereafter.
Correct. I agree with you on that. It's too coincidental not to be planned out.
So what that means is that basically the conviction is set aside. So he's
Correct.
no longer a convicted felon in Massachusetts, which has some impact on the civil case, perhaps,
On his
because
estate?
on his estate, on contract with the Patriots, because I'm sure they had a clause in there. They kind of have something that says if you are convicted of a felony, at the time you're convicted, from that moment forward, we owe you no obligation under your contract. And now he's no longer technically a convicted felon. So if he's entitled to bonuses or any back pay, or his estate is, and then ultimately that argument can be made now, where it would have been precluded if they had a felony clause in the contract.
And the way it works in the NFL is they're not guaranteed contracts like they are in the NBA and in Major League Baseball, but your signing bonus is guaranteed. So even though he was cut by the Patriots immediately after he was arrested for the Odin Lloyd murder case, his signing bonus would still be owed by the Patriots, so therefore to his daughter, which she's hopefully going to get some type of life for.
I mean, I like the argument that's put forward by some of the counsel on here that, by committing suicide, he forfeited his right to appeal the sentence on that, which the judge threw out and said, no, I don't care one way or the other. But he accomplished through suicide what he couldn't accomplish through life,
Right.
Through the appeal process. Even though criminally, it's pretty clear in the state of Massachusetts that, even without exception, no criminal conviction is going to stand now. So it's as if he committed no crime. However, in the civil arena, that's different. It's they're not bound by the ab initio finding in this.
No. If you remember, we'll talk about that. So Odin Lloyd's family is now filed a civil case for wrongful death. Now, they're not going to get in front of a jury for probably another year. The 4-year-old, if he doesn't have a will, she's intestate succession. She gets the estate. She's going to get that. There's no way that the Odin Lloyd family can stop that.
Nope.
Can't do it. So the little girl's going to get the money. She's got that legally and rightfully. Then they're going to get in front of a jury, and if a jury awards the family $50 million, Well, the money's already gone to the child, and that's done legally, so it's going to be very difficult to get the money from the 4-year-old. And there's going to be no money in the estate because it's all going to be gone. He spent it all on attorney's fees. So they're going to have a $50 million judgment that's going to be worth nothing, just like the O.J. Simpson case where the Brown family got a massive judgment over $30 million, and he never paid a dime.
Never will.
Because he passed all of his money, he transferred all of his funds legally and then moved to Florida and homesteaded his house. And by the time 2 years later, after his criminal case, they got a jury verdict that wasn't worth anything. So the moral of the story is, from a purely practical perspective, unless insurance covers something, or this is Warren Buffett who did it, right? And he's got $5 billion or $20 billion. I mean, he's going to have to pay it. That's why Michael Jackson and Mike Tyson and Dennis Rodman, they all paid tons of money out for acting like stupid idiots. Michael Jackson, who knows? I don't know what he did. That was criminal conduct, which is never proven. But Rodman was punching people, and Tyson was punching people,
doing everything.
And and so they paid out all this money because at the time they had $300 or $400 million, and if you had a $5 million judgment against you, couldn't file for bankruptcy. So they paid it, and that's why they filed for bankruptcy later.
Rodman, the our ambassador to North Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with regard to this, I mean, each state has its own set of laws, and there are certain exceptions that occur in personal injury actions. Even in the state of California, they may be able to, and there may be some law on this in Massachusetts, they might be able to get a prejudgment writ of attachment by filing and then seizing the estate to wait to find out what the determination is.
Yeah, from a practical perspective, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. In the criminal, it's preponderance of the evidence, which is a much lower standard.
Yes.
So it's basically, if you put a feather on the scales of justice and it tips in your favor, that's preponderance of the evidence. Just a feather, 50.00000001. That's preponderance. Beyond a reasonable doubt, much higher standard. It should be, because you're losing your liberty, not money.
Correct.
So in this case, if they do win, because the standard's lower, they probably will. I mean, if there's enough evidence to convict him in a criminal setting, even though based upon a suicide on a technicality, abatement ab initio applies, they're going to win the civil. The only issue is, from a practical perspective, you're going to have a beautiful piece of paper, but it's not going to be worth anything.
Nope.
And unless there is the ability to do a prejudgment writ of attachment, that's the only thing that could save him, really.
Yeah, it's just these are the type of cases. It doesn't matter if you have the best lawyers on the planet. When you're entrusted to get the imperfect remedy of money and there's no money to obtain, it's really kind of like having Tom Brady play football at a cricket match. I mean, it just doesn't do you any good.
Doesn't translate.
No, it doesn't translate.
You think he'd mess with a sticky wicket?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
We'll have a story about that tomorrow, about an individual that ultimately his girlfriend asphyxiated, and he indicated that it was during oral sex, and the issue is whether or not he can show the size of his penis to the jury. We'll talk about that tomorrow. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about Joe Montana, and we'll talk about a sinking high-rise in San Francisco and how Joe Montana is filing a lawsuit. Stay with us. This is All Things Legal. All right, this is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal. You find yourself basically at the midway point. Thanks for staying with us, and hopefully you'll continue to enjoy the direction we're giving you from a legal perspective. Basically what we do as curious personal injury attorneys, we kind of read the stories and we look at them from a slightly different perspective. So even though you may be familiar with the nuts and bolts of the issues that we're discussing, you probably haven't looked at it from quite the same perspective or vantage point. Edward Shady, this is where you want a Shady attorney giving you some legal direction. Tim Hodson are joining me this morning. If you want to put a face to a voice, you can go to Facebook. This gets streamed on our Facebook page. Also, you can go to YouTube. I just got done getting a haircut, which is a cross between Bob's Big Boy and G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. So if you want to check that out. That's our producer looking through, waving at me. I'm not sure exactly what that means. It's either he likes a short haircut because he's a bit of a Rush Limbaugh fan. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about Joe Montana. He's suing a San Francisco high-rise called the Millennium Building. It's right down there, really close to Embarcadero, right next to the Bay Bridge, maybe 3 or 4 blocks away from AT&T Park. And what they did, I just can't get this. They allowed them to put these massive high-rises in landfill.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite hotels, I grew up in the Bay Area, lived in the Bay Area, gosh, I don't know, 30 years. The Fairmont's an awesome place to go. It's old school. You got the best view possible. You got a view, if you get a room in the new tower, you got a view of Golden Gate Bridge, Coit Tower, Alcatraz, the Bay Bridge, and then the Transamerica Building all in the same room. And that's on basically bedrock. So, it's built into granite, right? Well, all these new high-rises are going down by the Embarcadero. It's all landfill.
In San
So,
Francisco.
it's kind of like, from a seismic perspective, it's like Jell-O. And so this one place, $13 million for a penthouse in this place, right? And the reason I became aware of it, about a year ago, I was reading this story about a 71-year-old lady. She basically took her savings and bought this beautiful place with a view. And she likes to play golf, and she was putting, and she noted that there was a massive break when she would putt towards the refrigerator, would end up near the fishbowl, right? And she was going, "It's not good." So it turns out that the building is sunk 16 inches, and it's listing towards the northwest at about maybe 6 or 7 inches of a tilt. I mean, that. I'm not down totally. If you're afraid of heights, you got any sort of height issues. I mean, high rises can be slightly unnerving, but the view's great. But if you know your building's tilting,
Not good.
Yeah. If you were thinking
next to the San Andreas Fault,
Right.
if you were thinking about buying in this building and we're leaning one way or the other, I think I'd stay away. It's going to be your own leaning tower of Pisa.
So it turns out Joe Montana. I mean, what they have, Joe Montana's an investor or has a place there. Hunter Pence has a place there. Venture capitalist Tom Perkins, apparently he passed away, but had a place there. So a lot of famous people, and it's up to $13 million for a penthouse. They have a private movie theater there. They have indoor pool, spa. They've got a celebrity chef, Michael Mina, that cooks there. So the issue is, and the reason these lawsuits, because what you would have would be perhaps a breach of contract, which is if the contractor and the builder didn't know that this was a problem but found out later, then that would be a breach of the warranty of habitability.
Yes.
Because, hey, man, it's not cool if you're living at a place near the San Andreas Fault and your building's tilting towards, the Bay Bridge. I mean, that's not good. But what they're saying is that these developers knew this. They knew of the problem, and they didn't tell anybody about it, and they continue to sell basically penthouses and condos, et cetera, in this building. And that was a reckless disregard for the truth or was malicious, and therefore there's punitive damages associated with fraud. That's where it gets into play. And if you have to pay somebody by the hour, which in this case is probably going to be done on a contingency basis, but many real estate attorneys work by the hour, and Joe Montana can afford it.
Yes.
So can Hunter Pence. And this is not going away. And my feeling is this is going to be a major problem for this developer. And in San Francisco, wake up. I mean, what's going on? You're allowing these buildings to be built in landfill? And I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I have common sense. I mean, you would think that you would make them go into bedrock.
Yeah, you'd want to drive down pilings all the way down to bedrock and then pour your foundation on.
Yeah, call up Fred Flintstone, man.
Mr. Slate. Mr. Slate, man, dig this out. But I like the opening of the article. It's all seeking at an unexpected rate. Well, what was the expected rate?
Yeah.
I mean, jeez.
Perhaps millennium doesn't mean what they think it means.
Yeah.
It means like 12 years.
We thought it would only be a 2-inch sink at this point.
This is the 10-year building, not the millennium building.
Yeah.
I by no means am I a real estate person, but if the first thing that someone said to me is it's a building in San Francisco on a landfill, I'm like, let's look at something else, please. Like, it just doesn't sound right to start out with.
Well, think of it this way. You're getting closer and closer to the bay.
Well, I have two cousins of mine. They're both soils engineers and deal with this stuff all the time. One of them was the head engineer when they redid the stadium down in Los Angeles. He recommended to the city they just tear it down, but they said, no, we want to keep Memorial Stadium. And they had to figure out how to seismically fit it and put it back together.
Yeah, because there's going to be a major issue, because if this one's got one, I mean, my brother lives in a building right next to this. Awesome view. He's 30th floor. He's got a great view of the Bay Bridge. But if this one's sinking and the same engineering was done, I mean, I would imagine that the other ones are prone to that.
Yep.
And think about this. I mean, okay, now the city of San Francisco
His neighbors are getting
is
closer.
on notice, right? Is on notice that this is happening. And they're responsible for code enforcement. So earthquake comes, this building collapses and falls over and knocks over another building, kills 200 people as a result of allowing this to move forward. This is going to be a major problem.
Yes.
So they need to get on this now, because if the worst happens and this building does collapse, then there's going to be massive liability, massive carnage. And this is, and somebody made an awful lot of money doing this. I mean, millions and millions of dollars, because San Francisco right now is insane for how much money you're paying. I think the median cost of a home is like $1.6 million or something in San Francisco. It's ridiculous.
Well, the poverty level dropped to, I think, or raised to over $110,000, and then you're considered in poverty in San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane.
So the point is that they allowed these people to build something pretty quickly, made a massive amount of money. Now it's tilting. All these people who made the investment are clearly being harmed. There's people across the street that if I lived across the street from this building if it's tilting to the northwest, then I don't want to be in that tilting, line.
No.
I would also say that I have a warranty of habitability issue because that building is now a danger to me. What are you going to do about it, Millennium Limited and City of San Francisco?
Well, and the engineers who put it together, especially whoever signed off on the soils report, because they would have been the individuals that would have seen what it would have taken and what the friction would have been on the pilings and everything driving into the ground to hold this massive tower up.
And it's all discoverable now. It's a lawsuit that's going to be filed.
Because somebody probably faked a report, and that's why the city signed off on it.
Yep.
So let's go from Joe Montana and that sinking feeling.
Who is Joe Montana, by the way?
No idea.
He's the quarterback for the 49ers.
No idea.
That's right, Ed. You're from Orange County. You hadn't had a football team for about 2 decades, and now you got 2 of them.
You're kidding. I know who he is, man. He used to play for Notre Dame.
That's true. And the Kansas City Chiefs.
So let's go from the Niners to the Raiders, right? So the Raiderettes basically filed an employment cause of action, say, look, we did all this extra work, and you didn't pay us for all this extra time, and we're entitled to be paid at least minimum wage.
Yeah, we covered this story, actually, when it first came out.
Right, yeah,
and
it did.
4 years ago, and they're finally getting paid.
Yeah, we've been on the. That's crazy. We've been on the air that long. Yeah,
that's how long it. The slow wheels of justice grind fine.
What's wrong?
Grind slowly but fine. They're finally getting their due.
What's wrong with these tight-fisted owners of these teams that make so much money? They got really the Raiderettes, just like the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. I mean, these are really part of the face of the whole program,
yes.
Right?
The NFL is hemorrhaging money. Each owner just got almost $50 million a piece that they don't have to share with the players for all those teams moving, the Raiders, the Rams, and the Chargers. And they're quibbling over $1 million with cheerleaders. I mean,
I just don't get it. I mean, what's wrong with these people?
I hear this all the time. That person's really rich. Why didn't they give them any money?
Because
that's why they're rich.
That's very true. That's why they're rich, because they don't give out money.
Yeah, well, there's rich like Warren Buffett, and he's giving away half of his, or maybe 90% of all of his money to charity,
which is awesome.
There's rich like Mark Zuckerberg, who's doing the same thing. And then there's rich like other people, right, who just keep it and act like idiots, like Sheldon Adelson. He made all of his money basically in casinos in Macau, where there's prostitution and drugs, and it looks like a lot of it is collusion and taking a lot of money from Chinese mainlanders who got all their money through the government, and they're not allowed to gamble in Macau, but he took that money anyway. And then that guy goes out and tries to stop another vice, which is marijuana, which is actually leading to people's health. I mean, people are feeling better as a result of this. And he's spending all the millions he made on gambling and bankrupting people. And that's the guy that, he would pay the Raiderettes less, right?
Yes.
A guy like Warren Buffett, who believes in karma, believes in goodwill, believes that if you treat people fairly, it'll come back to you tenfold. That's the way he would approach this. And so the Raiderettes were simply not even paid minimum wage. I mean, come on. These are representative of your football team, and just win, baby, don't work. So just pay them at least, minimum wage. I mean, really, come on. And so they ended up getting back pay, basically. So now, out of the settlement, if they dance for multiple seasons, they'll receive, more than $20,000 each, and that's only fair.
Yep. No, that's completely fair. It seemed like this is a finally a good thing that's come about this. And the fact that it was, after all this is said and done, it's only $2.5 million. It's pretty ridiculous. It took 4 years to get to that point.
Yeah, somebody will go. I'm glad they succeeded, because what it does is and they set the standard now for all the other cheerleaders and all the other teams. At least the other teams now look at it and say, we have to pay more than minimum wage. We have to look out for our cheerleaders, our yell leaders, if they have guys out there, I don't know, and treat them fairly, just like everybody else should be in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, let's say Deloitte and Touche, the accountants, they don't need cheerleaders, right? I mean, that would be superfluous. It wouldn't add anything to their brand.
They might need them now after that.
But the Raiders have the Raiderettes, which adds to their brand.
And they market them.
It's part of the Raiders, and the Raiderettes, are without the Raiderettes, the Raiders basically are less. They are. And the fact that that group that's making all that money through the NFL with all these TV deals and the billions of dollars, and the owner just appears to be, it doesn't seem like to be a super switched on guy to me.
He looks like Chucky.
He got hit by the lucky stick right between the eyes.
He won the genetic lottery, yes.
And, it doesn't seem like he's done anything that's brilliant to me that has led to a better outcome for this team. He just happened to be born with the last name Davis. And you can't even pay your cheerleaders that represent your team minimum wage. I don't get it. And that's probably why they're struggling a little bit. When that's your mindset, and that's the obvious thing you see. So who knows what they do behind closed doors for their janitors, right?
Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, the Coliseum, clearly what the stadium they play in, it was rebuilt and basically destroyed for the Raiders, is now falling apart because of that. And it's just, yes, there are many, many, many bad things following the Raiders around. It's just.
Well, Joe Montana's looking for a home, so he can move across the bay, bring Hunter Pence, and they can start a football team there. And, there we go. Let's solve that problem that way.
Yeah, having a lawsuit like this does not help your brand.
Oh, especially when you're leaving Oakland to Las Vegas, and now it's just they're not helping
It's going to be awesome. This is going to be like the only franchise that's going to end up in a 0-0 tie for 6 out of the games that they play, because everybody's going to be so hungover because they spent the night in Vegas.
I would have said Raiderettes raid the Raiders.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be interesting how the whole thing works out.
All right, so speaking of really silly, foolish behavior, let's take it to a whole new level. When we come back, we'll talk about Beta Theta Pi at Penn State, how they hazed a bunch of new pledges, and it led to the death of Timothy Piazza. And we're going to go and tell you about all the legal liability in this behavior. Stay with us. You're going to want to hear this. This is All Things Legal. All right, this is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal. This is where personal injury attorneys distill topical events into the legal essence. If Ann Coulter and Bill Maher had a radio love child, this is what you would get. Edward Shady, Tim Hodson joining me this morning. Before we took the break, we indicated we'd be talking about this tragic hazing event at Beta Theta Pi at Penn State. We're not fraternity haters. My dad was an eminent commander of Sigma Nu. My brother's a Sigma Nu. My brother has friends still to this day, very close ones, as a result of the experience he had with the bonding that you go through when you're in a fraternity. There are things that can happen that make you aware of camaraderie, friendship, taking care of the honor code, and making sure that ultimately you are good shepherds of the environment and good citizens in society. But sometimes things happen that aren't what you intended, and when alcohol is involved, typically that's when bad decisions get made. So this is Beta Theta Pi, and apparently this was a chapter of Penn State where they said there was no alcohol, right?
It was a dry chapter, right?
They said it was a dry chapter, which just blows me away. And Beta Theta Pi is saying this, the organization that was a dry chapter, which is, we had no idea what's going on. It's a dry chapter. Well, come on. While we go through this, you'll note that there's video of all this stuff. And so either they just, they had to know and they just turned a blind eye to it. I mean, there's unless you're absolutely have, out of your 5 senses, you use none of them.
Unless you have complete blinders on.
Yeah, come on. You've ever been out to a scene of a keg party after the keg party? It doesn't matter how clean it looks. It smells like beer.
Right, that statement from the president. We thought they were a dry. Come on, man. Anyways.
So Timothy Piazza he just pledged Beta Theta Pi. So this was like their first experience at the house. And basically a lot of drinking was going on. And ultimately Timothy Piazza died. And 18 of the fraternity members have been charged with crimes leading from felony aggravated assault, involuntary manslaughter, as well as tampering with evidence. And the reason that this is going to happen for them is because it's on video and they were texting. So there's going to be a lot of evidence that they're going to have, which is going to be either video or in writing as to what was occurring. And it's going to give an easy timeline to prove this case.
Yep.
If it was a bunch of drunken fraternity members without any video or any sort of documentation to prove it, isn't it true, sir, that you drank 2 bottles of vodka and you're trying to tell me you remember what happened?
Right.
Where were you sitting? Did you throw up? Did you pass out? There would be just ways to impeach that testimony, but when you got video, it's there.
Yep.
So here's what happened. At 9 p.m., 14 pledges arrive at Beta Theta Pi. They run a gauntlet of drinking stations, downing vodka, chugging beer, and drinking from a wine bottle. They play beer pong, as one will do. And by one estimate, they each consume 4 to 5 drinks in about 2 minutes. Then Timothy Piazza appears in a security camera, lined up with other pledges. His hand is on the right shoulder of another, kind of steadying himself. 9:58, he's drinking from a vodka bottle. 11:17 p.m., So 2 hours and 17 minutes later, he briefly walks around. The fraternity brothers put him on the couch because he's having a difficult time walking. A few minutes later, he staggers towards the front door, tries to, without success, to open it. And then fraternity brothers hear a fall and finds Piazza face down at the bottom of the stairs. At this point, forensic pathologists believe that he had a 0.28 blood alcohol level to 0.36, which is a pretty heavy blood alcohol level.
Yes.
Basically, at 11:24, he's carried upstairs by 4 fraternity members. His body appears limp. 11:26, somebody dumps liquid on his face to try to revive him. 11:32, brother attaches a backpack to him so he won't roll over onto his back and choke on his own vomit. A couple minutes later, brother's shown on tape examining Piazza and making animated gestures. He tells the grand jury that he saw a bruise on Piazza's chest. He stressed that he needed medical care, but another member shoved him into a wall and told him to leave.
Right.
So then we go into the next day now. It's after midnight. They're slapping him. Another one tackles another brother onto the couch, lands on him. So this guy's dying, and they're basically wrestling around him. And then he rolls off of the couch onto the floor. 3 brothers slammed him into the couch. Piazza rolls on the floor at 3:53. They try to get him to his feet at 3:59. He's on the floor in a fetal position at 4:23. He stands and staggers to a lobby area, falls head first into an iron railing and lands on the stone floor. And they just kind of leave him there. Fraternity brother comes downstairs to get a drink of water, and they find him basically in a fetal position on the floor behind the bar. 7:55 Piazza stands and staggers towards the basement steps. Captures don't capture what happened, but assume he had another fall. A brother searches his cell phone at 10:35 a.m. And looked up falling asleep after head injury. And then finally at 10:48, someone calls 911. And then 5:09, the fraternity president directs a member to get rid of all the evidence of alcohol. And at 1:23 a.m. the next day, he's pronounced dead from a skull fracture and a shattered spleen. So they got a couple things. He's underage, so you're not supposed to be serving alcohol to him. In California, if you're having a party, there's going to be no civil liability if they're over 21.
Correct.
There's going to be criminal liability, perhaps for a misdemeanor for over-serving somebody. But the act of serving somebody that much alcohol where they have those problems, civilly, you're really not going to be exposed to that. So then the issue becomes whether or not you're using reasonable care once you see all the other things going on. And that's going to be the issue. And then the amplifying factor from a civil perspective is he's 19.
Right.
And then at that point, there are avenues even in California when you're serving somebody who's underage where you could have civil responsibility.
Yeah, Civil Code Section 1714. I had to deal with it that last case I handled.
Yeah, so tell the listeners how that works.
Well, if you have somebody under the age of 21, and it actually was just amended about 6 years ago. This code section. It used to be if somebody came to your house, kids, friends, family, or whatever, and they had some alcohol and left and had a problem, it wasn't your problem. But they amended the statute so that if you serve, i.e., put out so that anybody can consume, even minors, alcohol, and they have a problem after they leave your house, whether problem to them or somebody else.
You're talking about the minor.
Yeah, the minor.
Correct.
That comes back to whoever served the alcohol, i.e. the house. Now, some of these older fraternity brothers are going to be over 21. Mm-hmm. And if they're out there giving alcohol to somebody underage, under 21, they're going to have civil liability if this occurred in the state of California. I imagine they probably have similar laws in Pennsylvania. So not only civil liability, they've got criminal liability for, involuntary manslaughter in this matter.
Massive criminal liability, yeah.
So over serving an adult at your barbecue and they leave and hurt somebody, you're not going to be civilly responsible at all for that. So
Correct.
You are completely insulated from civil responsibility. So if they drive, hit a tree, and they hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, the law in California says it's not the server, it's the person who used the alcohol that's going to be responsible.
Yes.
What you have to pay attention to is you're having a barbecue, you have to use reasonable care to make sure people under 21 are not drinking. So if there's alcohol out and you got 20, 16-year-olds and nobody's paying attention where the alcohol is, I guarantee you what 16-year-olds are going to be doing. They're going to be drinking alcohol, mostly. That's usually what happens. I mean, I did it when I was 16. I mean, that's what 16-year-olds do.
Remember that for graduation parties coming up. A lot of high school graduation parties are coming up.
Yeah, so if they get in a car and then they hurt somebody and you can prove that you knew or should have known that they were drinking alcohol and they hurt somebody, you may have civil liability. That's what you have to pay attention to. That's fair because, you should not be in a position where you're giving children an opportunity to drink alcohol on your on your property. Adults go nuts. I mean, if Uncle Ted drinks 15 shots of tequila and goes face first into the guacamole, I mean, that's on Uncle Ted, man.
It's a codification of common sense to me. All they're saying is, look, if you're over 21, be responsible. Don't let somebody that has no experience with alcohol or shouldn't be drinking alcohol get into a situation where they're not sure how it's going to affect them, leave your party and injure somebody else or themselves. And you should be looking out for that. And what the law now says, you're not only should you look out for it, you could be held civilly liable for it.
And what's going to be the big one in this case is the criminal is going to shake out the way the criminal is going to shake out, but the civil liability is going to extend beyond to the deep pockets, which is going to be Beta Theta Pi and then to Penn State. And they're going to say, look, we didn't know about this. This is an aberration. And you're going to say, look, dude, look at this video. And then these guys are all going to testify. And some of them are probably going to look, we'll grant you immunity if you testify as to what the school knew and what your chapter knew. Because if we get the higher we go up, the less likely this is going to happen again. And guess what? There's going to be massive civil liability attached to Penn State and attached. I mean, this is a 19-year-old smart kid who's got a great future ahead of him. And they put him in a situation where people who are in a position of authority make him drink all this alcohol, and he ends up dying. This is what they do. All right, man, we got to go. Unfortunately, that's the end of the show. Tomorrow, like I said, we'll be talking about a defense where an individual said that his girlfriend choked to death as a result of oral sex, and the size of his penis is now relevant, and we'll talk about that and what the judge is going to do in that case. So please join us tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great rest of the day. This is All Things Legal.
You've been listening to the All Things Legal Show with your host, Craig Ashton. For more information or to download the latest podcast, go to ashtonandprice.com or call 916-786-7787. And remember, for the best advice, don't think twice. Call Ashton and Price.